deciding on as we enter the ballot box, right? I do enter the ballot box. Well, I swear I've done this before. But you know, the issues themselves can be a bit confusing. The issues are really important, and there are people who are naturally advocating for both sides of any of these issues. The other thing is we're also going to be voting on elected officials to represent us and make decisions on our behalf. I did want to acknowledge that Third Space Action Line is not going to tell you who to vote for. And Third Space Action Line is not going to tell you what issues to vote for. But we are part of this community, and we need to be in conversation about what's really at stake here. And so as a company, we will support issues like issue 38 that we believe in. And it's a very deliberate, very well conceived, very thoughtfully pursued decision to support it. But on many of the other issues, we are just like you. And our staff is making decisions as individuals. Our leadership are making decisions as individuals. And so I wanted to put that preface out there so we don't sway you. But I hope that you find this time informative. I'm going to get out of the way until I have some more questions, which will probably happen pretty soon. But I'm going to pass the mic to my comrade, Caleb. Or Caleb, you're ahead? No.
Yeah, good afternoon. All right, we're going to jump right in. Before we talk about the issues, I want you guys to like set the frame, and everybody can pull up their sample ballots before you go to vote. So if you have not cast your ballot, if you go to the Board of Elections website, you can put in your last name, your address, and it will give you your sample ballot. So while we will talk about the issues, candidates may vary depending on where you live. So I want to encourage everyone, if you have not cast your ballot already, go and look at your sample ballot, do the research on the issues and the candidates before election day.
And on everyone's seats, you should have had a front and back paper, and it goes over the 4 major issues that we will be talking about today. So we will be talking about issue 1, issue 2, issue 5, and issue 38. And so with that, I'm going to Kayla kick it off.
All right, if you didn't receive the paper, just raise your hand. India's coming around with some literature. Okay, issue 1, let's start it off strong, starting heavy. Yeah, issue 1 is a reproductive rights ballot initiative. First, let's set the theme. Ballot initiatives are a process by which the people bring petitions to the people, the collective of the state, because the initial group A, have been dissatisfied with how our leaders, our government officials, are leading. That is how the process works. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of, lots and lots of money. I cannot stress that enough, that it takes a lot of money to bring a ballot initiative. That, again, it comes when the people are dissatisfied with how our government is leading. And then they put the question directly to the voters and say, hey voters, what do you think should happen for your government, as opposed to allowing for the General Assembly to make that decision for us. So when we're talking about these issues, that's how it even got in front of us, okay? Issue 1 is a reproductive ballot initiative that says that everything under reproductive rights up to and including abortion should be protected and enshrined in the Ohio Constitution, okay? Are you talking about abortion?
I am.
The first question I want, what is a yes vote for abortion and what is a no vote on the issue for abortion?
So a yes vote basically institutes every individual has a right to make a choice. So whether or not what that choice is, it is not up to us, but it's up to them. And our vote yes will give people the right to exercise that. And so when we think about that, right now the state is saying, we don't want you all to have an individual choice. And so abortion is a medical procedure. So when we think about it from a spectrum of healthcare, everyone should have a right to make a choice about their own healthcare over their own bodies, because they live in those bodies every day. And we have no idea what's going on in those bodies, but we want them to be able to make educated and informed choices about their own bodies. And it's between them and their medical providers. And another important factor is that if we do vote yes and it passes, it would actively protect the medical providers. And so it's not just the individuals seeking the medical treatments, it's also the providers, and it's going to provide them safety. No abortionist or doctor should be afraid to perform the procedure based off of state regulations. And so a vote yes means, hey, I believe that everyone deserves a choice. I believe that doctors deserve to be able to safely perform these very safe procedures, and they should not be penalized for doing so. A vote no is, I think that maybe I don't really understand it because I'm not a medical professional, and I don't think people should have a choice. So we should leave it to the people of the state. That is essentially what a vote no would be. A vote yes would be the opposite. It would be putting the people first.
If you understood that, raise your hand. Oh, very good.
Okay.
All right, come on, break this down. What is the current state of abortion in the state of Ohio?
So right now, it is legal to get an abortion procedure up to 22 weeks. What that means is if you are pregnant, you find out that you're pregnant, you can legally go to a clinic. So right now, our local clinic in Cleveland, Ohio would be preterm. That is where most people actively get the abortions. They go, they have to actually go through an advocate. So you can't just walk in and get an abortion. You have to make an appointment. You have to talk to an advocate. They talk about the different options that a person might have. And if you choose to go through that procedure, there's a few different options for it. You can totally do it, it's legal, it's a pretty quick, safe procedure, and just something else to note. Quite often, I don't know the exact statistic off the top of my head, but when people do actively get those procedures, they tend to opt for contraceptives because they're already on the operating table. They often get IUD inserted as well, which kind of helps people who are like, hey, I'm not really actively seeking to get pregnant right now. It's just another protective tool, and it's often subsidized. And so it's a really accessible way for people to actively be able to afford birth control. And so a no would change that. So it would actually move it. There's an injunction right now. There's a 6-week heartbeat ban that is in effect. There's an active injunction. Taylor, our resident lawyer, can explain a little bit more of the legal aspect of it. But right now what it means is because Roe v. Wade got overturned, the state of Ohio's constitution does not protect abortion. And so the state legislators enacted a 6-week ban. A bunch of really pro-choice folks was like, yeah, not really equitable. So they sued the state. They stopped the ban from being enforced. And so right now it is still illegal to get 22-week. If this does not pass, the chances of the injunction being lifted are very, very high. Not to scare anyone, but it would probably go back down to 6 weeks, which means a lot of people would not get abortion because the average person finds out around 8 weeks. And so you can only get an abortion up to 6 weeks, and you find out you're 8 weeks pregnant, and instead of Ohio, an abortion provider will not touch you.
Are there any caveats in the 6-week ban that would allow someone to get an abortion after 6 weeks?
No.
And when I say caveat, I'm talking about rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancy. Ectopic pregnancy being that a fetus dies in the mother's womb and the birth is terminated, but the fetus has to be extracted from the womb.
It's a complicated, nuanced question. So this goes back to when I mentioned the protection of providers. It's insurance, it's a lot of different other things that come with it. Abortion clinics have to have something called a transfer agreement. And what that means is if there is a danger that is presented, if they need to be sent to a neighboring hospital, the abortion clinic has access to do that. With the 6-week ban, it really, really makes it hard to have transfer agreements. And you can still have it legally, but it's a lot of different hurdles that you have to jump through. And so the clinics with those abortion providers that are in those clinics are typically scared to perform abortions, and they will try to redirect them. And so again, it just goes back to accessibility. People should be able to access abortions when they need them, not because they are going through something detrimental to their health that is near death. I think that when we talk about choice, you should not have to have a near death or traumatic experience to make a choice of your body. And that's essentially what the 6-week ban would enact.
One of the things that was striking to me, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, I don't know what time it is at this point, But we sat with one of our lawmakers, our state legislators, Juanita Brent, and she told us about a bill that was circulating for signatures back, it was at the end of the year, I cannot remember when it was. But she said, you know, there's this bill that's been circulating that I'm really, really concerned about because it precludes all reproductive needs, everything, not just abortion. It enumerated condoms, it enumerated birth control, it also said IVF. And I could not, I was like, what is the cognitive dissonance here? Like, why would you include that in there? But everything that had to do with reproduction was enumerated in this bill that was being circulated. Now, I should say, it was not introduced in our Ohio state law. But what was terrifying was that they were really trying to sell this bill, right? What I want to talk about a little bit is, abortion is a hot topic, divisive issue, right? But this proposal doesn't just talk about abortion, it's everything up and including abortion. Tell us about the contraception and all the other things that are included in reproductive health care that we often leave off the conversation when we're having this talk.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna actually talk to the audience. So I've seen a lot of Black folks in the audience, and I think it's really important to talk about maternal health in the state of Ohio. And again, maternal is not just for women. Anybody with a uterus can actually conceive, and so I do want to be inclusive of the genders. But when we think about Ohio and the maternal health rates just in our state, reproductive health is a crisis for Black folks, specifically Black women who get pregnant. Oftentimes they're ignored, they're not listened to by their doctors. Preeclampsia is a huge issue, hypertension is a huge issue, and complications come. And so having the option to be able to terminate a pregnancy that you are not having a good time with, say you have a job and you have nausea every single day, but you work an hourly job and you have no more PTO days. And you also know at this point that having a kid is not the most viable decision for you. Having a right to be able to go is really important. But also, they start with abortion. So I'm actually thinking about Texas. I'm thinking about Texas. My cousin just moved from Houston to Cleveland, and she was like, whoa, it's like night and day, politics-wise. And so abortion is banned in the state of Texas right now. And the organizers down there are having a hard time because not only is abortion a hard thing to get, but contraceptives. They didn't just attack abortion clinics, but they also attack reproductive health clinics. So we're thinking Planned Parenthoods, we're thinking free clinics, we're thinking of people that work really, really hard to make sure that they have access to birth control. It also will eventually affect with what birth care looks like as a whole. Right now, you know, a lot of people are trying to do doula programs and things of that nature, but what happens if you're a doula and somebody comes to you with a complicated pregnancy and you don't have an option for them? And so it just makes it really hard to be a medical provider. So thinking about Kayla's question, I'm thinking about what it means to actually be a medical provider, what it means to have that ethics and the code of ethics and be able to provide the best care, but more so, what does it look like to address Black maternal health in Ohio?
Thank you so much. How am I doing on time? What's my time? Oh, okay.
Shouldn't be me, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Lee. I want to pivot and talk about issue 38. We're going to skip around here. Follow me, okay? Issue 38 is a Cleveland-specific issue, and I want our lovely guest, Erica Anthony, to explain what issue 38 is and what a vote for and what a vote against would mean.
Well, thank you all again. Thank you, Third Space, for hosting this conversation. I do want to echo Mordecai's comments. We think it's really important as an organization, Cleveland Votes, that we are educating people and giving them access to tools and resources so they can make the best and most informed decision. We all have individual choice, and you know, even as an organization, we're made up of individual people, and we have really lively conversations among the team. But as an organization, you know, to maintain the efficacy of who we are and our integrity, it's important that even if I have a position on a particular issue, that I maintain that line and make sure that you as voters in our community have the resources. So this is a great way to do that. So issue 38, also known as the People's Budget, also known as participatory budgeting, we have a couple of AKA names, as Kayla indicated, is a charter amendment change for the city of Cleveland only. What this initiative, this amendment is proposing is that 2% of the city's budget would be decided upon by residents of the city of Cleveland. Just to give a little context for what participatory budgeting is, participatory budgeting a little instrumental there. Participatory budgeting is actually a process that started in South America. It made its way to the United States in the late 90s and has evolved pretty dramatically across the nation. So we have cities like Philadelphia, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Seattle, Portland. I mean, the many, many cities across the nation. They all look a little different because obviously our unique characteristics as cities and jurisdictions vary, but the core of it is really a couple of things. One, to increase citizen participation. Two, to make sure that residents have equitable access to information about how their local jurisdiction is operating as it relates to their financial processes. So in the case, our budget, which, is a living organism, for lack of a better term, as to, how our city functions. The third purpose of participatory budgeting is to really allow residents to provide direct input as to how the dollars that their city is, managing are organized. For us as a coalition and for the FOR position, we acknowledge a couple of things, a couple of truths about our city and the state of affairs here in the city of Cleveland. It's no surprise, unfortunately, that we have low voter participation. This has been trending down for the city of Cleveland for quite some time. Even in large presidential years like our most recent one in 2020, while we saw tremendous turnout across our nation, tremendous turnout across the state of Ohio, what we did see, unfortunately, was lower voter turnout in cities like Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. So we know that there is a disconnect as it relates to individuals' motivation to want to participate. So thinking about innovative processes where citizens and voters can really think about how can I contribute to the social fabric of my community is really our primary goal as a coalition. The process entails a couple of different steps. If this is successful, upon the passage of this charter amendment, the city of Cleveland will open an application process to select individuals to be part of a steering committee. There'll be 10 individuals that will make up that steering committee. Mayor Bibb will have the ability to appoint 5 of those individuals, and City Council will have the ability to appoint an additional 5. Once that steering committee is formed, they will come together as a collective, very similar to other boards and commissions that are managed under the city of Cleveland, and they will essentially put together the rule book and the roadmap for how this will look in our city. Again, many cities have done this. We are in close communication with many other cities, but at the end of the day, Cleveland is Cleveland, and we have to make sure that what we're creating makes sense for the residents of our community. So they will come together, they will put the rules together, the rule book and the processes, but the general overview of what it will look like is there will be a period of time when we are educating residents of the city of Cleveland about what participatory budgeting is, what is permissible under participatory budgeting, right? I jokingly say I may want a spa in my house, but that is not an idea that I can propose and that would be funded by the city of Cleveland, right? We want to be practical and realistic about, what are the things that maybe we're all dreaming about seeing in our neighborhoods. Over the course of this campaign's tenure for the last 2.5 years, we've held simulation events. We've actually held one here at Third Space and across the city to hear directly from residents, what would you like? And, I think what people will be surprised, most of the ideas are pretty boring. People are asking for their roads to be in better shape. We've heard a lot from youth who are seeking, more proximate crisis services. Unfortunately, mental health and other issues of suicide are pretty prevalent with our young individuals and community. And so thinking about how do we leverage our existing infrastructure, like our recreation centers, and bring different services to youth and to young individuals so they have access to these type of services and practices to manage their mental health. People have talked about green space, right? We just saw this beautiful presentation by Director Wong. I think we all want to be able to say that we have proximity to green, beautiful green space in our community. So that period of time is educating people about what is possible, because there are limitations. These are still public dollars, so not everything is going to be permissible. It could be programmatic, it could be infrastructure, it could be capital investment. So making sure that the residents are familiar with what is permissible. And then we'll hold a series of meetings across the city to have people come and propose these ideas. I should have noted also with this charter amendment, there will be a full-time staff member at the City of Cleveland responsible for this, and then the steering committee. So together they will work together to make sure that these meetings are occurring, and that individuals, again, are able to propose ideas. Once we get through that proposal phase, the staff member at the City of Cleveland, as well as a third-party nonprofit, which would be designated pending this passes, would then come and look at these ideas and just make sure that, again, all of them are actually permissible. Once that process is completed, then we would move to moving this all to a ballot. So this will not look like our electoral ballot, like we will all see here in the next few days down at the Board of Election or your polling precinct, but it will be similar feel to individuals having the ability to vote on these ideas, and then ultimately the prioritization will happen through that voting process. And then depending on what the program and or project is, then it would be directed to the appropriate department at the City of Cleveland to finalize and ultimately implement. So that is where we are on the fourth side. What we have heard, and just as to name the realities, our mayor is not supportive of this charter amendment. I do want to note that when Mayor Bibb was running for office in 2021, he was the only mayoral candidate that endorsed our campaign. So this campaign actually started in April of 2021. So at that time, Mayor Bibb, or candidate Bibb, did endorse the campaign. He also endorsed it coming into office, 21 to 2022. Earlier this year, there was legislation introduced by his office that was in support, or that we supported. Unfortunately, that legislation was held before City Council's Finance Committee. And once we move forward to take this to the people, as Kayla noted a moment ago, unfortunately, he no longer maintained that support of this ballot initiative. City Council also is not supportive of this ballot initiative, as well as some local unions. And so the positions of individuals who are not in support of this include one, that this will cut resources, that this will impact things like policing or EMS or critical life services that residents need here in the City of Cleveland. Some of the other arguments around this include that we already have great participation here in the City of Cleveland, and that we don't necessarily need to have this mechanism, that this mechanism creates another layer to the existing bureaucracy of how our city functions, right? So we have a mayor, we have city council, within city council we have council president, and then obviously they represent respective wards across the City of Cleveland. The opponents, believe this brings another layer of bureaucracy to an existing process that takes place. They also believe that individuals will not necessarily participate who are not already energized and jazzed up about civic participation. They don't necessarily see how this particular proposal will increase the participation of those that are currently not engaged. So those are some of the arguments that we've heard, but happy to answer any questions.
If you understood them, please raise your hand. Okay, very good, very good.
Clearly I know where to come to make sure I'm talking to the informed people. Thursdays after that, Fridays.
Very good.
Intergenerational Lunch. Noted.
I see a couple hands already.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to know the timeline, because it sounded like it was a lot involved from, in other words, for example, you say, look, I wanted to do update of my community center, here. All right, then the timeline from when I want to propose that and the steps that you're talking about that it takes to go through to get to that, what kind of timeline is that?
Thank you, Kayla. To be honest, I can't give the specific timeline, because part of this charter amendment includes the steering committee along with that staff member at the City of Cleveland getting into the finite details of how this will look, right? So the first year, again, pending that this passes, is really about putting all the rules and the process together and making sure that obviously we're crossing all our T's and dotting all of our I's. And when I say our, that means the City of Cleveland and the steering committee. And then from there moves into that education phase that residents understand what is permissible. So it could be a couple months, but it could be up to a year because, and that's an estimate, because at the end of the day, you know, infrastructure projects clearly take much longer. And that's why it's really important that we have this relationship with the respective department heads and their respective staff, so that part of this education process is also that residents understand how long it takes to get things done, right? I'm a planning commission member for about a year and a half now, and while I've worked adjacent to community development or worked for nonprofits in community development, I have learned a lot about, you know, how long it takes and all the different layers, right? Because more often than not, while it might be the City of Cleveland as an example, leading and implementing that project, there are so many other jurisdictions such as our county, our state, it could be our federal government. There's a lot of different, you know, sort of actors that play into the implementation of that project. But part of that is making sure we're communicating that effectively and in a transparent way, right? So I don't want you coming to a meeting thinking like, well, Erica said, you know, this is gonna be all juiced up by, you know, Christmas time. And it's like, no, right? We wanna make sure that if I don't have an answer, like I said right now, I'm gonna say that, but we will make sure that along that process that we're communicating what estimated timelines look like, because this still does have to go back to City Council, right? So again, there's layers of protection and checks and balance in this process. This is not, you know, 10 individuals on a steering committee making it rain for their homies and their friends in the community, right? There's still gonna be checks and balances in place.
Sorry.
Oh, no, Sean, if you have a question.
My question is, if this doesn't pass, and not saying that I'm not for it, but there's some things that I believe should have started before this. And mine is, the reason why you don't have voter increasements, so to speak, is because people don't trust, have hope, or believe that the people that represent them are doing anything. So I was looking at it as more of a committee that answers the questions of the people, like talking about a community center. This area, we don't have one. And no matter how much you try to put forth that information to the council person involved, you're not getting adequate information in regards to that, because that is one of the things that are needed, like you were saying, in regards to the young people. You want to know why they're running around doing this, that, and the other. They have nothing else to do. So my situation is, if this doesn't pass, would you go in that direction of working with the communities and answering their questions to bring it forth so that they can be taken care of?
I promise I didn't plant this lovely person in the audience. So thank you for your question. I want to start by acknowledging a research report that our organization, Cleveland Votes, commissioned in 2021 in partnership with Policy Matters, which is a local think tank and a national organization, HIT Strategies. So coming off the heels of the 2020 election, as I just said, we saw very low, voter turnout in the city of Cleveland in comparison to, comparable cities both in the state of Ohio as well as across the nation. And so a lot of us were sitting there, scratching our head like, what happened, right? This was a major presidential election. And so we commissioned this research, and actually one of our top findings is what you just noted. One, we did both focus groups and text poll, and the respondents essentially said, we're not apathetic, which tends to be the messaging around, well, Clevelanders must not care. They clearly don't care, right? Just look at the voter turnout rates. Clearly folks don't care about what's happening in their community. The respondents of our study said, actually, we're not apathetic. We have deep concern about what's happening in our specific neighborhood, our community, our city at large, and we actually have a lot of ideas, right? We believe proximity is really important. You'll often hear Evelyn, Mordecai, myself talk about Brian Stevenson and his phrasing around proximity, right? We can't opine opine upon issues if we're not proximate to the people and the issues, right? I understand which communities I represent. I don't represent all communities, right? I can't, there's no way, even as a Black woman in America, there's no way that I can represent all issues. So it's important for us that we are elevating, what is happening and connecting with those that can speak, with confidence as to what's happening in their community. What happens if we don't pass? We've actually started this conversation. I am a member of the steering committee, and probably about 3 weeks ago, we said to ourselves as a committee, we need to start talking about what happens after November 7th, either way. We know that there are a lot of concerns about the state of affairs in our community. This group came together out of frustration. When we learned that our city was going to receive $511 million of ARPA dollars, one of the highest in the nation, we immediately said, well, residents should have a say in like how these dollars are being allocated, right? And that's honestly how folks came together, around the kitchen table, for a lack of a better term. And it has evolved clearly over the years, but we are in it to win it. And if it's not issue 38, I know right now that at least the 10 people that make up the steering committee, like, we are committed to seeing then what's the next way that we can affect change in our community. We have talked to thousands of people across the city over the course of the past 2.5 years. We can't lose that momentum. It would be, it would be a disservice, not just to our campaign, but to our community, from a level of respect and accountability.
All right. Are there any examples that you guys can share about participatory budgeting working in certain communities, and those communities who voted it down or have used it and has not been successful?
Yeah, so there's lots of cities. So Grand Rapids, Michigan, I know we have issues about Michigan, the whole sports thing. Don't fault me for that. But there, we actually had one of the representatives from Grand Rapids in Cleveland a couple months, or last year, time also, I don't know when that was, talking about some of the examples. So we've been, most notably, I would say, in close conversation with New York, Boston, Seattle, Evanston, Grand Rapids, and so many of the examples I provided before are very similar. I also follow many of these groups on social media, so I can stay inspired by seeing, these cities that have implemented PD and what they're doing. Again, there's very practical solutions. You're seeing things related to improving the infrastructure of either playgrounds or any sort of green space that exists, or adding infrastructure to communities. Obviously, we here in the city of Cleveland, we're known as the Forest City, and I say this as a non-resident transplant, and we've seen, tremendous decline in our tree canopy, and there's tons of people, organizations working to restore that, right? And what that means for our health, right? Lee was just talking about the impact of health and our health care, and what that means, obviously, the environmental hazards that have impacted us here in the city of Cleveland as a result of not having that tree canopy trickle down in many different ways from a healthcare perspective. So mobile crisis units have been really big in some of the cities, really thinking about how we can make information more accessible from like a data and technology standpoint, understanding that we unfortunately still have digital redlining in the city of Cleveland, and that means that there are pockets of our community that just legit don't have broadband access. It's not that an individual does not want to connect, obviously, to broadband, but it's absent, and most notably in our more prominent Black neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland. I wouldn't say that there are examples necessarily of unsuccessful projects. I think it's more about what the expectations are. And I think what we've heard from fellow advocates across the country is the notion around really needing to be clear with community, because to what this individual just indicated, there has been so much failure already. So it's like, well, why should I believe in y'all? I would be asking that question. You should ask that question, right? You don't know me from a can of paint, right? So I think it's making sure that you are creating space to build relationships, build trust, be accountable, be able to say clearly, I don't know the answer, or be able to say clearly, this didn't work. And I think for me, on a personal note, I've said often, PD is not a panacea or a silver bullet. It's not that if this is successful and we are able to implement it, that it's gonna happen, one, without any challenges. I think part of what we've heard is like, well, what's gonna be different about the engagement efforts? The same people that tend to show up to, ward club meetings or block club meetings, like how are you gonna get individuals beyond that? And the answer is like, we have to try. You know, this experiment of democracy has been happening for a couple of centuries, and I don't see it benefiting my community at large. And I'm willing to take the chance to say, we're gonna try something. And we think it's important to study it and evaluate it and course correct where we see fit.
I see we have a few more questions. I'll take 2 more questions before we jump back into the issues, and then we'll open it up again for questions. So if you have questions that you're burning to ask, please write them down, and then we'll get back to them at the end because there's another statewide issue and then local issue that we wanna address.
Really quick question. So I see that I'm in here with my, not my peers, but my elders. How do I become a resource for you guys to bridge the gap in between how to get my community and my age group a part of what it is that's here?
I think that's a question for you.
Oh, sure. I mean, I can build on the question because how many people received a mailer this week about PB?
Issue 38.
Or sorry, about issue 38? Only a couple. I know my daddy did because he showed it to me. I think it's connected to the reason why we hold these quote unquote intergenerational conversations or intergenerational lunches together is so again we can bridge that divide. What has been concerning to me, and full disclosure, I am an issue 38 supporter, so I will be voting yes for issue 38. But what concerned me is that once issue 38 made it onto the ballot, the first thing that I saw from our elected officials was what was going to get cut if this $14 million, quote unquote, came out of the budget. My personal opinion, again, this is not representing Third Space Action Lab, is what those elected officials and city officials determined were cuts were a choice. Everybody understand that? Like, that is a choice. It is not in the charter that if $14 million comes out, that these are the things that must go. They could decide for less incentives for developers. They could decide for not another screen at Brown Stadium or something. These things are choices, and I think that elected officials were talking to your questions specifically to elders, because the things that they led with were elder services, youth services, fire, EMS, police, like the things that would scare us and say, absolutely not, or we'll not vote for that. But again, it's important to remember that those are choices. This is what they chose to highlight. So I think that we just need to continue to be in dialogue. So you gotta talk to your grandma, your auntie, the people on your street, like about what is there. And I would go a step further to say what I was gonna do with my daddy, but it was a little late. Go on the website that is there, because we know that some of our elders have some issues like traversing these websites and things like that. Can't nobody register for the Intergenerational Lunch. My mom has told me 50 times this week alone that nobody can register for the Intergenerational Lunch. But that we take the time as younger folks to like sit down and walk through websites or whatever we need to do to like bridge that information gap.
The one other thing I would note is that this charter amendment would allow individuals 13 years and up to participate in this process. So, obviously for electoral elections, you have to be legally, 18 years and older. We think that's really important. We as an organization, Cleveland Votes, do a lot with our local high schools and colleges as well. Because it's muscle memory, right? And so if we only wait until an individual is legally able to cast their ballot, I often say we have a lot of, what's the term? Mordecai, Evelyn, no, I don't know terms. There's a term like coming of age ceremonies, right? If you're a Latinx, it's quinceañeras, Jewish, it's bar mitzvahs, right? Like we have these like coming of age. Rites of passage? Is that what you're calling it? Okay, because I'm a believe Caleb. And this is being recorded. So because of that, we jokingly say, like, when you turn 18, no one welcomes you to civic life. There's no, like, formal ceremony that says like, hey, now you're 18, these are the things that you can do. So absent that, we do think it's really important to engage individuals even before they are of legal voting age. So having individuals 13 and up to participate in participatory budgeting, we think is incredibly important so that they can start to understand how our public finance works, our budgeting processes work, and civic engagement. Thanks y'all for the pledge.
So, we have another statewide issue that's on the ballot. So everybody throughout the state will see this issue. It's issue 2. Issue 2 is the regulation of recreational marijuana. Somebody said it with marijuana. Okay. I gave this talk at my church yesterday night. My church is a strict, apostolic Pentecostal home upbringing, and I was like, I don't know what y'all used to call it. Somebody helped call it out ganja, reefer. I said, okay, well y'all know what I'm talking about. It is the regulation and legalization of recreational marijuana. That is issue 2 that is on the ballot. It's gonna be, again, it can be controversial depending on what circles you are in. But we know that there are corporations that have already come into the state that have started to produce marijuana. You can get a marijuana card. But what this says, that it legalizes and regulates cultivation of marijuana for ages 21 and up, okay? So it is similar to alcohol and how alcohol is regulated. I had to break it down for them too. I said last night, now, y'all remember Prohibition? And everybody kind of looked at me, I was like, okay, you're not too old, you're not old enough to remember it. But you know what happened with Prohibition in the 20s and stuff. It was coming through. We know folks got weed and smoking weed and doing whatever. Now they got CBD and THC. They got the stuff, right? They got all the stuff. But folks still got weed too. And this is going to allow for a 21-year-old and up to be able to consume it. And there's some other things too. The other thing that I want to talk about is the decriminalization of it.
Yes.
Okay, because we know. That's why I went to school, law school in the first place, because of the criminalization of weed. So, Lee, tell me about what a vote for issue 2 stands for and what a vote against issue 2 would say.
So a yes vote would, to echo Miela, it will make anybody who is over the age of 21, it can take a non-expired, this is very important, you cannot give an expired ID, but you would need a state ID, you can walk into a dispensary, you can buy, I don't know the exact regulation, but you can go in and you can buy weed, the pot, as my grandpa calls it. And also, if this does pass, you will be able to grow at home. You will legally be able to have, if you're a single family household, you will be able to have 6 plants. So that's 6 little buds that you can grow, which will make a lot of weed, just so you know. And if you're a dual family household, stop! Go ahead. If you're a dual family household, you can have 12 houseplants, which again will cultivate a lot of pot. Things that are really important to know, it is regulated. So you cannot just go to homies, Don is the first person I see, hey Don, I see you have plants, can I get some seeds? You cannot do that. You actually do have to purchase the plants from the dispensary, when I did read it. Also something else to know, yes, it will be legal to smoke weed. However, in the state of Ohio, landlords still have jurisdiction to approve whether or not a tenant, and so if you do violate that clause in your lease, they do have the right to evict. And so I think it is really important, a lot of people smoke pot, but some people might not be as cool with it as you think. Also, you cannot drive and smoke joints. I think it's really, really, really important to know as Black folks, make sure you tell your people, you cannot drive and smoke weed. It does not protect you from getting DUIs and other things that are applicable to that. So yes, it's legal, but with responsibility. Right now, you can just drive to the state of Michigan and you can get weed. A lot of people do it, or you can get a medical marijuana card, which it is medically regulated. I think it's really, really important. If this does pass, it will regulate weed. And so, my dad jokes, he's like, weed's not like it used to be. Street weed is a little different, he says. That's his words, not mine. He's like, it's a little different. got a little extra pizzazz, is what he says. And so when you go to the medical dispensary, it is actually tested. There are actual chemists that actually test the potency levels of the THC within a plant, which is why you have to purchase them from a dispensary. Again, Don, I wouldn't be able to just like, yo, let me get a cutting. You could, I mean, technically, we have to come see you, but you know, it's not partisan democracy collective. We have to tell you that you do have to follow the correct procedures. If you vote no and it doesn't pass, medical marijuana will still be a thing. I think it's important, it's a cost barrier to get a medical marijuana card. It costs about $250 to actually get a card. It's about $75 a year to keep it renewed. Not saying I know. No, seriously, it's about $250 to get it started. You do have to have certain medical procedures. Mental health is not actually covered, so you literally have to say my back is broken, and that's essentially how you get one. There is a distance within dispensaries because you cannot have a certain amount of dispensaries in a certain mileage. It's more costly to actually buy weed in a dispensary. So, you know, again, not trying to go too deep into the cost of it. People consume marijuana. It's a fact. A lot of people smoke weed. And something I think to note is that when you buy it on the street, you can get it for a lot cheaper than if you were to go into a dispensary. I cannot confirm what you die. It's not partisan democracy.
That response did not come from anyone up here on the panel.
Confirm or deny.
I see a lot of cameras out here.
But I do think it's really, really important to know that dosages matter. Also, not just loose weed, but also edibles. That's something else to know. There's a lot of different forms of marijuana and different ways that you can consume it. And so having it state regulated, I'm not saying it's the best because y'all are doing business, but it is healthier, it's safer. You know, if I take a gummy and it's 5 milligrams and I got it from somebody on the street, it can be 50. And you got time. But if you go to a dispensary and they tell you it's 5 milligrams, it's been tested and it has to be approved because they're licensed and they will lose their license. And so that's just something to know if we do legalize it.
I see people chatting. Give me 1 second. One of the questions that I got yesterday that I thought was a really good question, Leek talked about, you know, landlords can still have prohibition against it. So can your jobs. So
you will have to get drug tested. It does not exempt you. Having a medical marijuana card does not exempt you from failing a drug test. I think it's super important to know if you're going to consume it responsibly. And also make sure that as you're consuming it responsibly, you're not operating vehicles.
if you got CDLs, your CDLs will get taken.
And you will never be able to get it again.
If you work in the medical field, you're gonna be gone. So there are certain industries that also will have regulations on it. What we understand and know just in our system, if it passes, our lawmakers are going to go through the laws and put in some regulations. So it's not just gonna be a free-for-all. The other thing that I read about it is that there will be various pots of money allocated to our state for taxation, because we're gonna be able to tax on it now, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It's gonna be a tax on it. They're going to help for folks who have substance abuse, because I talked about this yesterday in church, and so the church folks was like, well, it's gonna get people addicted and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, sugar can get people addicted, but you don't see us, okay? But they are taking that into consideration, and there will be substance abuse, there will be money put toward boards or Adams board, and hopefully that can increase beds and provision for substance abuse as well.
It's a good pro.
Yeah. I saw a hand.
I just wanted to say what she was saying about it doesn't really work out. When you go to the dispensary, when you go to the dispensary, you tell them what's wrong with your body, and then they go through and figure out the type of weed that you need that would help you relax the nerve and different stuff like that. Because that's what I do, because I had sciatic nerve problems, and the sciatic nerve is nothing stimulating. That pain right there with you crying out, I had to quit my job due to the fact that I cried all the time. I get in daycare in my home. And my sciatic nerve had me so bad it was controlling me. Where I would just make me cry in front of the kids, and I'm like telling the kids, keep on going, there's nothing we can do, just keep going. It would also control my bladder and my bowels. So it would control a lot of stuff, so I had to end up quitting my job in order to get on, so that I can get my life together, which is helping me. I don't know if it does in that else, but it does help me, and my doctors help me get along with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
I see Dawn, I see Edwin.
Hey, Don.
I don't think I need a mic. So you mentioned, Kayla, about the decriminalization of marijuana. So if this passes, are there subsequent things that happen with the justice system to be able to start that process of individuals who were in prison for marijuana? Like, how does that work?
That's a great question. The bill is not retroactive for people who have been arrested. Okay, we all know that there's some folks that got picked up on some bad, diabetic, whatever. It is not retroactive. What it does do, it is decriminalizes so that there's no longer a misdemeanor or a felony if you are caught with recreational weed going forward. It also has a socioeconomic underpinning to it as well. And so it takes buckets of money and it says we are going to allocate money for people from racially, socioeconomic, disenfranchised communities and try to rectify this harm, right? And allow them to engage in the process as well. Because what we see with the corporations and the dispensaries that are here, they are not people that look like me. They are not people that have money like, you know, that got my income level. These are white folks with a lot of money who can get the attorneys. We know somebody who is black and a woman from Cleveland who is building a dispensary, right? And they are trying to block her because they don't want black women in this space, right? And so it cuts that out. Now, of course, our laws and our policies has so much work to do when it comes to mitigating the harm that was done to people who have already been incarcerated, but they have started to allocate like plots of money and trying to integrate them into this system. And of course, the term that they use, they do not use the term reparations, but I look at recreational marijuana usage and the access for black people as a entryway for a reparatory justice that has been done for black people, particularly who have been incarcerated. That's Edwin, and then we'll go to yes, sir.
I don't think I need this either, but I got this question from a parent. If the recreational use of marijuana is legalized, does it mean that people can walk around on the street and smoke? And what restricted areas will there be?
So I'm gonna use the examples of actively being in states. So I'm gonna use Colorado and I'm gonna use Washington. They don't care. I'm gonna use New York City too. So I was recently, the most recent was I was in New York City, literally everybody in the subway had a joint and nobody really cares. Again, it's more so the safety aspect of operating a vehicle. So like if you're actually behind the wheels and you can have a joint and a cop is driving past you, it's a little high. I would not do that. But as far as like kind of walking around, also just being mindful, like you don't want to be at playgrounds. I mean, if kids are around, you don't want to be sparking up a road while like kids are swinging. Like that's not probably an appropriate place. So I think, I don't think that it's something that's going to be a focal point for law enforcement, kind of taking away from Kayla's point of the reparative aspect. A lot of people have been in prison wrongly for it. But just, if it's being used responsibly, you're walking down the street, I don't think anybody's going to bother you. So, yeah.
And to the last point, I'll project, and then we'll go here, and then I think.
Can we go here, and Ms. Rita, can we get one question in before we come?
So as while this bill, again, these bills are introduced by people who are dissatisfied, but the lawmakers are still going to have regulations. And so your businesses, your schools, all of that, you can't smoke. Cigarettes are regulated now. There are smoke-free zones, right? So you can anticipate that on the back end that people in our government and our systems will implement regulations so that those things are not in place, or so that kids aren't getting contact highs as they walking out of education systems.
Okay, with there be rules that an employee your employer can test you for marijuana use anytime they want to?
Well, currently, an employer can test you
Right now,
anytime.
that's
you
what
know.
I'm saying, if this law is passed, does it mean that your employer cannot test you with it?
No.
But right
You're-
now, they can pull you in and say, well, we're gonna test you for marijuana.
That doesn't change. You can be a recreational smoker and your employer can still mandate that you can't smoke, right? And particularly in industries that need you to be focused and not be under the influence. And so regulations will still come, particularly from private institutions. Now, the lawyer answer that I'm gonna give you, when it comes to like public institutions, I don't know. We'll consult the attorneys if it passes. But private institutions, they still have a right to demand and expect that you show up to work without THC or marijuana in your system, or alcohol. Like, you please don't come to work as a nurse drunk, right? The same is gonna be true to being under the influence of marijuana. I don't know if that's gonna be, I don't know how the state is gonna handle that, or our public institutions.
Another thing, if you're driving along, you know, they smell marijuana coming out of your car, and the police pull you over and test you. Under this new law.
So you cannot drive under the influence now, or marijuana. Like, you cannot be under the influence operating a vehicle. Or any substance, right? It's not gonna be a felony for you to be walking down the street, but if you are operating a vehicle, that poses a public safety harm. And so when we pass laws, we don't do that at the exemption of public safety. So there will still be public safety rules and regulations in place that we have to abide by. We as advocates are gonna have to watch closely in how officers handle that. And NAACP and all of us are gonna have to be diligent in that, because even now, I smell something. Oh, that don't mean I'm smoking it, right? I could've just left somewhere.
Windows closed.
Listen, I could've left somewhere. I don't smoke, I've never smoked, but listen, when I come out of some of these concerts, I bet you I smell like weed, right? And so we're gonna have to closely monitor the regulation of it, the implementation of it. We'll need to be talking to our police departments and how they handle it, and updated training on that as well.
Ms. Reader, can you hold your question till we go to the next one, and then we can do them all together?
Oh, okay, very good. So we're gonna move to the Tri-C levy, and I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, I'll move through this pretty quickly. So this is a levy that will appear as issue 5 on our ballot. So this will apply for anyone in Cuyahoga County. Tri-C is our local community college. They are seeking a levy to provide more resources so that they can provide more services and training and programs for the students. The 4 position is essentially that, we need more resources to be able to serve the needs of the students that participate and attend Tri-C. What this will look like from a financial standpoint is a $14 increase for every $100,000 of assessed value if you are a homeowner in the city of Cleveland. It also will provide for every $1 that is contributed, $11.80, I believe, of economic benefit. So when we think about, not just the 2-year associate degree, there's a lot of certificates and professional development offerings at Tri-C. I will say, as a wife to an educator who has counseled and supported students over the years, this is a really great opportunity. We have a really quality community college, and it's a great on-ramp for many students who maybe don't exactly know what they want to do from a 4-year degree standpoint. So it's a really quality program or quality institution. I think there's not too much opposition. I think the opposition is that increase, right? But I think in the grand scheme of things, when we think about the economic benefit in the long term, that we have more individuals in our community that have the credentials that they need to be successful and having a career pathway. So much about our communities are changing, the type of industries, technology. So we really need to be thinking about and preparing for not just what's in front of us the next couple of years, but really 10, 20, 30 years from now, and making sure that our local institution has the type of training and certificates that will meet the needs of our workforce demands in the coming years.
And I just want to add, a vote no means that the cost per credit hour will increase, because essentially they're actual funding will decrease. And so the aid that they are able to provide for those 2-year programs, and it's not just associates. I mean, they have an amazing culinary program, they have amazing arts programs. A lot of people that go to Tri-C or start at Tri-C end up transferring to CASE or CIA or CSU. When I was in high school, I took a couple classes at Tri-C and they were paid for, and it's paid for by levies like this. And so we are endorsing issue 5. I think it's really important. Education is how we maintain, and we want to see our youth be educated. We want to see them have access to education, and so an additional, $50 a year can help keep the cost low. And so this is, to me, an easy yes. Again, I'm not partisan, so I can't tell you how to vote, but I am voting yes on this. Probably a very powerful yes on that.
And education is not just for our young people, but our adults as well. Because Cleveland's adult literacy rate is low, and Tri-C offers amazing reading programs for adults who need to upskill in their reading and literacy as well.
Can I just give a couple of just general updates, because I know we're getting close on time. So just want to remind folks of a couple things if you have not yet voted. So there's 3 ways that you can cast your ballot. You can do it absentee or vote by mail, early voting at the Board of Elections, which is located on 30th and Euclid Avenue, and in person on election day at your local precinct. The deadline to request your ballot is October 31st, Halloween. However, I will highly recommend that if that is the method of voting that you are seeking, do that today. Do that tomorrow. U.S. Postal Mail moves pretty slow, generally, not just in Ohio. So we want to make sure that that request gets in and that you get your ballot back in time for that ballot, for it to be dropped off at a ballot period of time. Early voting is happening right now. You can go to 443vote.us, which basically redirects you to our local Board of Elections website, and you can see those hours. They will start doing some extended hours next week into the later part of the evening, and then we will have Saturday, November 4th, which plug Cleveland Votes and a bunch of partners that are in this room right now. We'll be down at the Board of Elections doing a little pull up to the polls party. We'll have food, snacks, all that good stuff. And so you can vote on Saturday, November 4th, and then the last day that you can vote early in the Board of Elections is Sunday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So after church hours, if that's your thing, you can go with your family after. We no longer have the Monday before election. So this is something that is changed as a result of legislation that passed at the end of 2022. So please do not go to the Board of Elections on Monday, November 6th. Your last day to vote early is Sunday, November 5th. If you are going to vote in person at your polling location, please make sure you have updated ID, so unexpired either driver's license or state ID, passport, or military ID. This is another change. So in the past, you could maybe bring something like a utility bill or a bank statement. So maybe you just recently changed and you haven't gotten your updated IDs yet. That is no longer permissible. If you do not come with a valid, unexpired ID, you will have to file a provisional ballot. Provisional ballots get counted after Election Day, unless you go back to the Board of Election and provide valid ID. So again, vote early, starting right now. You can go today through next week up until Sunday the 5th. If you are going to request your vote by mail, please do that by Halloween. And then if you are going on Election Day, have an unexpired ID, confirm your polling location, because there have been a lot of polling location changes. So don't assume that just because you've gone to the same elementary school or the same church, that is actually going to be the location. Please confirm. And then as Kayla indicated, make sure you download your sample ballot. What we did not talk about today is there are about close to a dozen municipal judges that are going to appear if you are in the city of Cleveland on the ballot. So you want to make sure that you know who those candidates are and take the time to research those. And if you're not properly in the city of Cleveland, you may have some other things on your ballot.
We're gonna open up the floor for all questions now, so if you go right here, I'll come over to you, so if you have any